There's some interesting effects of hormones that actually you can observe on the outside of people that tell you something about not just their level of hormones, but also about their underlying genetics. And these relate to beard growth and baldness. And it's fascinating. The molecule, the hormone, dihydrotestosterone, made from testosterone, is the hormone primarily responsible for facial hair, for beard growth. As well, it's the molecule, the hormone, primarily responsible for lack of hair on the head, for hair loss. So how does that work? Well, DHT circulates in the body, and it binds to DHT receptors in the face to promote hair growth. But it binds to DHT receptors on the scalp to promote hair loss. Not incidentally, the drugs that are designed to prevent hair loss are 5-alpha reductase inhibitors. So remember 5-alpha reductase from the huevadosis? Well, the people that discovered the huevadosis went on to do a lot of research on the underlying biochemistry of this really interesting molecule, dihydrotestosterone. They identified 5-alpha reductase, and 5-alpha reductase inhibitors are the basis of most of the anti-hair loss treatments that are out there. And so there's some interesting things here. First of all, the side effect profiles of those treatments for hair loss are quite severe in many individuals. Remember, DHT is the primary androgen for libido, for strength and connective tissue repair, for aggression, even if that aggression, of course, is held in check, but just sort of ambition and aggression is related to dopamine. But within the testosterone pathway, less so pure testosterone, although pure testosterone has its effects, but DHT is, at least in primate species, including humans, is the dominant androgen for most of those sorts of effects. And if you look at somebody, everyone can predict whether or not they're going to go bald based on looking at we're always taught our mother's father. So if your mother's father was bald, there's a higher probability that you're going to go bald. The pattern of DHT receptors on the scalp will dictate whether or not you're going to go bald everywhere or just in the front, or so-called crown-type baldness. And the density of the beard tells you about the density of DHT receptors. Now, this varies by background, by genetic background. And actually, around the world nowadays, because people travel and people form couples and have kids with so many different people of different mixed cultures, you're seeing this starting to disappear. But there are areas of the world where all the men seem to have the same pattern of baldness, like a strip of baldness down the center with hair still on the sides and full beards. That's because these patterns of DHT receptors are genetically determined. Elsewhere, testosterone levels can still be very high. DHT levels in the blood can be very high, and yet people will have very light beards or no beards, and that's because they don't have a lot of DHT receptors in the face. And still other cultures, you'll see people with huge beards, tons of beard growth, like their beards are growing all the way up to their eyes, and they have huge heads of hair, and that's because they have a lot of DHT receptors on the face and not on the scalp. So there are a lot of effects of DHT that you can just see in male phenotypes. And it's interesting that these hair loss drugs that are, or to prevent hair loss drugs, are directly aimed at preventing the conversion of testosterone into dihydrotestosterone. And that's why they, to some extent, prevent hair loss, but also to some extent have a bunch of side effects that are associated with low DHT. Along these lines, there's a particular sports supplement that a lot of people use called creatine. Creatine, now there's a lot of research showing that creatine can bring more water into the muscle. It can support strength. It does a number of other things. It might even have some important cognitive enhancement effects, although mild. The studies there show that it can be significant. Some people, not all, it's more anecdotal, report that creatine promotes hair loss. It differs by individual. For some people, that's true. For others, no. But yes, it does appear, based on the studies I was able to find on PubMed, that creatine does promote 5-alpha reductase activity, and therefore the conversion of testosterone into dihydrotestosterone. And so it makes sense that it might promote some degree of hair loss, as well as beard growth, as well as the other effects of DHT. I recall in junior high school and middle school going home one summer, it was 7th grade, coming back in the 8th grade, and a kid that I knew that I was friends with went from being like a young kid to, he was like a grown man. He had a full beard. It was amazing. It was like he would completely transform. I mean, puberty, as I've said before, is without a doubt the most accelerated rate of development that we will go through at any point in our lives, even faster than infancy, just in terms of the huge number of different cognitive changes and physical changes. Not surprisingly, that same individual was mostly or bald by his early 20s. And that's because he must have had just exceedingly high levels of DHT. I also played soccer with this kid, and he was basically like dribbling past everybody. It was like a grown man playing soccer with a bunch of little kids. Full beard, bald at 20. And so the rate of maturation, the rate of aging is very interesting. It's hard to know rate of aging. There's some genetic tests that now can allow you to do that, things like Horvath clocks and things of that sort. Beautiful work of David Sinclair at Harvard and others has pointed to this.